Hi, welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers. I'm Mark Owen, and each week I invite a panel of business experts to review the morning newspapers, find out what's happened in their own individual business, their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. But before I start, I just want to thank our fantastic sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors, and we couldn't do the show without them. Each week also, we have a hot topic, and I got a parking ticket this week, so let's hear from the panel's views about traffic wardens, parking tickets, and parking charges. Okay, let's introduce the panel. We've got Max Wilkinson MP for Cheltenham since last year's election win. The summer recess will soon be over and he'll be returning to Parliament shortly. So what's his plans for this year in the House, and how difficult is it to get his voice heard? And also what he'd like to achieve at the end of this year for his constituents. Welcome, Max. Thanks ever so much for coming on the show. We got Greg Pilley. He's the managing director of Stroud Brewery, established in 2006. It makes great taste and ethical organic beer. Please buy some. It's brilliant. The company employs over 60 staff, has a turnover of 2.5 million. It also has a fantastic restaurant. The hospitality industry is a tough one, so we'll hear from Greg on national insurance, minimum wage, energy costs are affecting it, and the brewery industry in a whole. And what's he doing just not to stand still? So we'll hear from Greg about that. Great to see you again, Greg. We have Glenn Collingbourne, Director of Hazelwood, specialising in tax. The company has more than 600 staff split across 4 offices: Cheltenham, Staverton, Bristol, Cardiff, an approximate turnover of over 45 million. Last time he was on the show, he explained how business leaders are selling up, moving to Dubai, Switzerland, France, Malta. Is this still the case, or has it got worse? And also, the budget's coming down the tracks. What's his view on that? And finally, last not least, and new to the panel, we've got Julie Sargant. She is the CEO of the Cheltenham Lido. It's a 50-metre heated swimming pool that combines fitness, health, and well-being. It has over 100 staff, full-time and part-time, a turnover of £1 million, and receives over 240,000 visitors a year. Julie joined the company in 1996 as its very first employee, and her role has evolved over the years, including lifeguard, deputy manager, before coming chief executive. And this is, let's be honest, a tough business. Rising energy costs, staff costs, customers feeling the pinch. How does she balance it all? Well, we'll find out very shortly. Okay, let's see what's making the headlines from the national newspapers, courtesy of the BBC. The Metro, they think it's itch all over. The Times, all babies to be offered chickenpox vaccination. The Daily Mail, now Asda boss tells Reeves stops taxing everything. The Financial Times, Citibank's fears mount over Reeves' tax raid. The Daily Telegraph, Rayner dodges £40,000 stamp duty. The Guardian, Russian envoy summoned as UK and EU offices hit in Kiev. The Daily Express, French police won't go to in-sea to stop the boats. The Sun, balloonacy. Harry to meet Charles, and the Daily Star, MP speeches by AI. I can't imagine Max doing an MP speech using AI, but we'll find out. Hi, Max. Great to see you again. What have you picked out for the papers, please, sir?
Think about that AI one first, if you like. I don't write speeches by AI, but I think it's fairly common in most businesses now that people will use AI in some way. So to put a little bit of sort of meat on the bones of that story, right? If someone writes to my office, we will have a system where we can use effectively an AI bot to ask a question of all of the stuff that we've uploaded to the back end of our system about a certain issue, about what I've done on an issue, about what my opinion is. And that helps my constituency casework team to then get that person who's written to me a reply much more quickly. And we've set a KPI of 5 days for response for every email. We pretty much hit that most of the time, most weeks, unless it's something really complicated, partly because we use that internal AI system. It's really useful, and I hate to break it to voters out there, but any email that you get that's a response signed off by your MP's name, And it's very unlikely your MP is sitting there and responding to 200 emails personally per day. They should have signed off everything that goes under their name, rightly so, but they're not sitting behind a computer. So that's a little bit of how MPs' offices work. And if we didn't use technology, I'm fairly sure most people wouldn't get a response, because my constituency casework team work extremely hard to get through those hundreds and hundreds of emails we get every single day on any topic that you can think of under the sun. The story I've picked up on today is actually from the I paper, and it's about migration and migrant hotels. This is one of those things where I think progressive politicians and politicians on the general sort of moderate centre ground and progressive side have usually tried not to talk about it too much. I think we're at a stage now where we actually all have to have a much bigger discussion about it. Of course, the use of asylum hotels in town centres and city centres up and down the country, not a good thing. Not a good thing for communities, and actually not a good thing for the asylum seekers either. They create focal points for unrest, as we've seen, actually having so many people living in close proximity who all have the same issue that the government is not dealing with, the Home Office is not dealing with under the previous government or this. That's really not a good thing. It's not a humane way to treat people. It's also not the right thing for communities. It's right that there are questions being asked about this, and we've just got to get the system for processing right and have a much more compassionate system that helps the people who need to be helped, but also recognises that actually there's been a long period of time where this has been entirely out of control. And there's a certain politician who's been talking about this a lot over the summer, and he's got a lot of coverage. Well, I think we all should bear in mind that the last big idea he brought to the table was Brexit, and that reduced the amount of control we have over our borders. Immigration has gone up since then, and actually it's been a total economic disaster as well. So while he might have some simple answers to offer on everything, and he can do a lot of shouting and pointing, he doesn't have the answer on this, and we shouldn't trust him.
Okay, thanks very much, Max. God, and all that you managed to get a lot across there in a couple of minutes. Thanks very much. Okay, I'm going to bring you in, Greg. What have you picked out for the papers?
Well, there's quite a lot of negative news in the mainstream papers. So I have a regular newspaper that comes to me, which is Positive News, which focuses on the things that have happened right over the last month or week. And there's a story in there. Oxford University have developed a feed formula for bees that just helps recover those bees. And bees are suffering largely due to loss of habitat, and in fact, it's not just bees; it's our sort of biodiversity, insect life in general. And the underlying problem, of course, in farming is the use of herbicides and pesticides, which has massively declined biodiversity over the years since sort of the agricultural revolution. And again, we'll come to that. We're a dedicated organic brewery because we believe the biggest ingredient we use is barley, and the best thing we can do is to use barley that doesn't damage the landscape and the countryside.
Okay, no, fantastic. What's that name of the newspaper? Positive News.
It's called Positive News, yes, and it focuses on all the things that have gone well over the time. Yeah.
I must admit, I've stopped watching the news at night now. It's too depressing. I can't sleep. So maybe reading.
Well, it's a good one because there's plenty of good things that do happen, and we tend to forget about those things. So if we're looking to, look at a positive future and move towards good things, then we need to concentrate on what does work well. So it's a great paper to subscribe to.
Okay, I think I will. Thanks ever so much for that, Greg. Glenn, let's bring you in. Great to see you again. Thanks for coming on the show. What have you found in the papers?
Okay, so I've gone my usual three, or maybe not the same three, but three papers, and I'm just going to skirt over so that's the headlines. So this is from the I paper. This is purely, I don't know if you can see that, but anyway, Trump still flirts with the idea of a third term as president, on the basis that headline is absolutely terrifying. And we all, I think, suspected this or were worried about this might happen. Obviously, we don't know if it will or not, and this is what the article's dealing with. I just wanted to quote from the paper, hence quoting Trump. The line is that I wish I could do with the accent. The line is that I'm a dictator, Trump said of his critics, but I stop crime. So a lot of people say, if that's the case, I'd rather have a dictator. Most people say, if he stops crime, he can be whatever he wants. I'll let you take that away.
It's quite frightening.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So this is from The Guardian. Obviously, given what I do for a living, I had to bring in this is from The Guardian in this part down here. New tax on rent income being considered. And I'll probably talk a little bit more about this later without dwelling on the detail too much, but that is a concern raised by who knows who, that put national insurance charges onto rental income because that's currently outside of the scope of national insurance, along with a few other types of income. And then completely different, and you mentioned it in headlines already, the Daily Telegraph, end of the chickenpox party as NHS rolls out jabs. And I highlighted that actually just more because like my wife's a community healthcare nurse, and so consequently we do think of chickenpox as being one of those things that's quite itchy, a bit annoying. If you've got children, then of that age, you think, oh crikey, they're going to be off and all this kind of thing. How do I get time off work? What's overlooked is the fact that the children can get seriously ill over chickenpox.
Mm.
We sort of think of it as a bit of a mild disease, and actually, in fact, one of my children was quite unwell with it and was ended up in hospital. So, that is a good thing. Actually, I think I'm struggling to remember now because my kids have all grown up a lot. I think my youngest son was actually involved in the trial of the chickenpox vaccine, and not surprisingly, my wife jumped at the chance to put him on it, so he never got chickenpox. It worked. So that's me.
Okay, thanks ever so much. Good old roundup there. Thanks ever so much, Glenn. And also, chickenpox for adults is serious illness. I mean, you could die from it. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks ever so much. Julie, let's bring you in. Great to have you on the show. What have you picked
Thank
out
you.
for us, please?
For me, it's the energy increases, and whilst the papers have been focusing on the domestic market, it's really hitting my industry quite hard in terms of swimming pools are high energy users, and many swimming pools have closed across the country. 500 have closed since 2010, and over half of those since the pandemic. And energy and the cost of running these facilities and also people's spend in their pockets are an influence on that. And at the Lido, we're doing everything we can to mitigate the increase in energy costs, but it's a huge concern to the industry and also the fundamentals of children learning to swim. We're an island nation, and it's really important that these provisions are open and available to the whole community, and they're not cost prohibitive. And as I say, they're extremely expensive beasts to run. So that's a huge concern for us. And also the other one is the youth unemployment crisis. We're a big employer of young people. We like to bring people in at all ages, but especially at 16 and start them off with their first jobs. And to hear that our youth are going to miss out on that fundamental opportunity to get their first experience in a working environment, we're in danger of losing a nation that has the understanding of what work is and how they make those early adjustments from education into work. And we need our nation to become a little more stable financially for these large businesses to feel they can employ youth and give them that opportunity. So they're my two issues from the papers.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie. And does the article say why people? Is it the rising cost of minimum wage, national insurance, those sorts of things?
And also as we head towards the next tax issue and business rates, especially, they're just in fear of what the future will bring, and the focus is changing. So, I know of youth that are unable to find jobs, and they don't have parental support. They don't know where to turn, and some of them literally do not have enough money to feed themselves. And to think that we're in that crisis is extraordinary. They don't have the necessary skills to know where to go to find help. And obviously, as experienced adults, we get involved and we help them and we channel them in the right directions. But there's a lot of young people out there that are struggling and need help and assistance.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that, Julie, bringing that to attention. Let's bring you in, Max, actually. Let's talk about youth unemployment as I've got an MP here with us. 16-year-olds, it must be a real worry for you as well.
I don't employ any 16-year-olds myself, but I remember having jobs as a kid. I started off, my first job was as a paper boy, and I think I got paid about £9 a week. And I remember once the newsagent giving us a 20 pence per week pay increase and telling us that this was all very good news. And I remember thinking, well, that's not very much, is it? Wouldn't even have bought me a Mars bar in his shop. But there is an issue here. Right? The things that Julie was saying there, they go to the heart of some of the problems that the government has created by increasing ENICs and at the same time increasing minimum wage. And of course, no one's against higher wages for lower earners. That's a good thing. But if you combine the cost of living crisis that everyone's been going through and that businesses have been suffering with an increase in the minimum wage and an increase in employers' national insurance contributions at the same time, that's really had quite a profound effect on every business I speak to, every SME that I meet in Cheltenham, and I run my business forum every quarter, and I welcome feedback from all businesses because I'm a pro-business liberal. It's really quite obvious what's happening. While the government came into power and said that they were not going to put taxes on working people, the businesses have taken decisions to either employ fewer people than they were going to this year, cut the hours of people on casual rates, and that has an impact particularly on those 16-year-olds, right? Or alternatively, some of them who I've spoken to have said, well, effectively, the amount of extra money that we're paying in ENICs means that we're paying our staff lower wages, or the salary increases that people might have had are not being awarded. I get that the government had an absolutely horrific inheritance from the Conservatives, who over a long period of time showed wanton disregard for the state of our economy, particularly SMEs, but anyone who's trading internationally and with Europe. We know what Boris Johnson famously said about business, right? But that is not an excuse for some of the decisions that the government has made since they came to power. They were warned it would be ruinous, not just for the private sector, but for the third sector and charities as well, and for the public sector too, like the NHS. And unfortunately, those warnings were not heeded, and it's because they boxed themselves into a corner on their manifesto last year. I think, as someone who wanted change at the last election, and I stood as a candidate offering change, it's just really, very, very disappointing. And now we see what's happening in the run-up to this budget, and it's really unwise, I think, to just keep throwing ideas out there, because it just means that businesses can't have that certainty about what they think might happen next. So I'm really very concerned about what's going to happen. I think there are ways that the government can make up this shortfall. They could be taxing digital giants. They could go back again and look at what's happening with some of those businesses that can afford to pay extra tax, that are currently paying lower levels of taxation. But at the moment, unfortunately, it looks like they are looking at other sources which might create more problems as we go forward. And of course, we spoke about Trump earlier on as well, right? The suggestion that we can have a great relationship with Trump and ignore the relationship that we have with our nearest neighbours in Europe, as we continue to do, is totally for the birds, right? Everyone knows Brexit has been a disaster, so we just need to get on with rebuilding that relationship with Europe.
Okay, no, thanks ever so much for that. I'm sure Greg's got an opinion, especially on the youth employment as well. But I'm going to stick with you for a second, Max. Obviously, you're going to go back to Parliament very shortly. How do you, in a smaller sort of party, but obviously a major party, get your voice heard, for your constituents, in the Houses of Parliament?
Challenge whatever party you're in. I think if I was one of the however many hundred Labour backbenchers, I'd probably be thinking it's difficult for me to have my voice heard as well. I think that the key thing that you've got to do is pick an issue where you can make a difference, and then find a mechanism in Parliament to make that difference. In the first year, I managed to get a private member's bill put before Parliament, which was about introducing solar panels on the roofs of all newly built houses. And the government then worked with me, took that away, and then came back with a proposal. Actually, the government takes a lot of stick about a lot of things, and I wasn't very kind to them in my last answer, but there are some things that they're getting right. And on the environment, actually, they've stemmed the tide of a really toxic debate that the last government started, and they're moving in the right direction. And I helped them along the way with my Sunshine Bill, So it is possible to have your voice heard. I've also managed to, on a more local level, bring together all of the MPs in the county to talk about maternity, because at the moment, and Greg's based in Stroud, he knows what's going on at the Stroud maternity unit with the closure of those beds. In Cheltenham, we've got the issue with the Avita unit not being open for labour and births. So I've managed to bring together all the MPs to try to work together and put a bit of pressure on the health service. And now we see that there's actually been an end to the recruitment crisis in maternity at the local trust. And we're hopeful that there's going to be some movement very soon. So for me, it's about finding issues, picking those issues, plugging away at it, and then building that consensus as well. And of course, one of the things that Cheltenham's been doing very, very well on that front has been on the Golden Valley development, and we've finally made some progress. We've secured the £20 million where nearly every area lost their levelling up bid over the last year. I did a lot of lobbying in the background, got in front of the right ministers. We've secured our £20 million, and in the last couple of months, we've managed to get past the stage where finally the first planning application for Golden Valley has gone through. So I think it's all just about those things where politicians need to work together, they need to pick issues where they can make a difference and keep plugging away at it. But you're right, it's difficult to get your voice heard when you're one of 650. It takes a lot of patience. Everyone thinks the main skill you need as a politician is being able to ramble on and make long speeches. Actually, you just need to be patient and persistent.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that, Max. Let's bring you in, Greg. Great to see you again. Running your business, that must be a tough gig, running Stroud Brewery. Let's go back to the youth employment, because you employ a lot of young people as well.
We do. I mentioned that we've got, a large part of our workforce are temporary workers on zero contracts. About 50% of them are under 24. So we're a big first-time employer locally. And yes, disappointingly, a couple of years ago, we made the decision to stop being a living wage employer. So we were a national living wage employer, and that was the living wage is what's deemed, the minimum wage to actually live on, and it's greater than the national minimum wage. And actually, that was largely, we do pay the living wage for most people, but it is those younger workers that slipped off that list. And we sort of justified it internally because many of our young workers still live at home. They're not entirely independent, but some are. Some people want to get away from home, and that is the minimum. They need that wage. I sort of hinted that we grow every year, our turnover grows, but our profits don't, and that's because overheads are continuously going up. National insurance this year added £45,000 to our bill. The wages added another 70. So let's say it's £100,000 at a 30% margin. We've got to do £300,000 a year more sales just to stay the same on those costs. And that's not the only costs that have gone up. Other things go up too. So, we might have to go £500,000 a year extra sales in this year just to stay exactly the same. And that means selling more, but also putting our prices up. So we were talking about, the cost of living. Actually, wages go up, but then businesses have to pass those costs on, whatever they are, because you've got to remain profitable. So it goes round and round, and actually you don't get anywhere. So there is a more fundamental issue to tackle around the economy, and I haven't quite got my head around how you plug that gap. And at the same time, of course, government has got to make revenue because we want services, we want social support. There's a lot of people that require need. So how do we generate that income? And of course, it makes sense to go into businesses that are being profitable. But as we've all hinted, actually, you've got to tax where people can afford it. Yes, and for us as well, we're a business that really has a focus on sustainability, both social and environmental, and we put a lot of effort into that. And of course, at the moment, sustainability is totally voluntary. It's optional. There is no obligation for any business to do the right thing. And that also adds cost to our business, which, we try and add a premium for, but there's a limit to that. The market can't take it too much. And that is really putting us under pressure. People are spending less, going out less. Why would they spend money on a business like ours that's trying to do well when they can buy another beer that tastes just as good for the same money? So, how do we incentivize businesses that are doing well? How do we encourage people to put their money into businesses that are doing the right thing? That's, if we want positive change, I think the most empowered thing we can do is to spend money on businesses and activities that are trying to make a difference.
I mean, Greg, there must be a particular point where people just work, a tipping point where you put your prices up to such an extent that people just can't afford it or just won't, just say, oh, this is too much for me.
Well, we see that, our bar is half our income, and that's fine. We can manage that on a daily basis. We make a lot of activities. We've got about 30 events a week here that bring people in from all different walks of life, very varied. The other half of our business is selling beer to pubs. Now, the gatekeepers there, the landlords, they just want beer that will sell. When you go into a bar, you'll buy what's on the bar. So that's where it becomes really difficult. Why would they buy a cask of beer off us that's organic, vegan, and doing all the right things when they can buy another cask from another brewery that tastes, pretty much the same for less. So that's where it becomes really difficult. And we've seen a drop in some of those sales, especially over the summer. People switching to cider and all sorts of other reasons as well. But we have that conversation every day. Why would a landlord buy our beer, and how do they pass those messages on to their consumers? What's that extra added value? And so, we have a niche. There are some people that just can't afford to pay that extra 20, 50p a pint. And we have to find our customers that can and will and value what we produce.
No, thanks ever so much for that, Greg. I've got to ask you, obviously, turnover is up, profits.
About the same year on year, we don't change. I keep looking at, how we might break that mold, and I've been doing that for 19 years, and it's the same story. I actually made more money as a sole trader, just making beer, selling beer, not doing anything else. My most profitable year was just before I expanded the brewery. Ever since, everything has been slightly better than break even, and we employ more and more people, get bigger and bigger, do more activity, have a greater impact. But actually, as a turnover, we're not, ever making huge profits. And I think that's true of the industry. I think it's not just my business, it's every brewery, and very similarly, hospitality as well. It's a lifestyle type thing. You're not going to make a fortune out of it. And again, I think this is where we really need to look at the value of hospitality. These places are places where people get together, community connections are made. There's a huge social value in these places that is sort of underestimated, and they're treated purely as a sort of a business and, the potential to make profit and tax. And I think we need to give value to the sort of social benefit that hospitality and community pubs make.
Thanks so much for that, Greg. I totally agree with you. In fact, it's not just breweries; it's every single business I talk to, as Max was alluded to earlier. Glenn, let's bring you in because obviously you're at the sharp end of business as well, because you deal with all these different tax issues for companies. Are you seeing the same as Greg and Max was saying?
Yeah, I mean, everybody will comment on difficulties that they're facing, and of course, it's no one. Every industry and every sector's problem will be different. Obviously, there'll be some overlap, and I'd imagine Greg has got an issue with the cost of power in the same way that Julie has. I'm presuming presumably brewing is very energy intensive, so I'm sure that's an issue as well. So there's be a lot of overlap on those sorts of things, and of course, the thing on the other side that we'll see is, yeah, I mean, we've said it already, the cost of employers' national insurance and those connected issues were obviously a huge change to business, and also again that like national minimum, or rather the national living wage changes. Of course, within the county, there's a lot of businesses will rely on unskilled, I'm going to say unskilled labour, so effectively just bobbing around that national minimum wage amount. And so, of course, if that increases, they know full well that their profits will fall. And can they pass on that to the, I'll say the consumer? But if it's a business which isn't led by consumerism, say healthcare, then of course that's a lot more difficult because your client, as it were, isn't an individual or a business; it's a local authority. So quite clearly, that's a huge impact. And then the other thing we touched on briefly earlier on is let's call it the other end of the scale, where you've got some very successful and wealthy individuals, and whether they've got an intention to remain in the UK. And that's always been, it's always, I mean, doesn't matter which government you're talking about, there's always a conversation which involves, oh, you're going to make all the wealthy people leave the country. And while possibly I can't comment on it politically, I can say that those inquiries that I get, I happen to specialise. So almost coincidentally, I specialise in the taxation of individuals who are leaving the UK or coming back to the UK. And so I would say that over the last couple of years, there's definitely been an uptick in the amount of inquiries I get for people who are looking to find ways to leave the UK, or usually for tax and political reasons, putting the two things together. So it could well be individuals who aren't British originally, but have made their life over here, and they've thought, I don't feel welcome anymore. I've definitely had that feedback. It could be people who are actually British originally and say, again, I'm not making any political comment on it, but they'll say, I don't like the way the government's dealt with this issue. I think it's just going to get worse and worse, and I want to leave. And this is usually around, I'd say this specifically around business owners rather than businesses themselves. It's quite difficult to move a business over the outside the UK. And obviously sometimes Julie can't make her Cheltenham Lido appear in Dubai for very obvious reasons. And Greg would probably have a similar issue if he tried to move to a different country. But possibly the business owners, particularly if they're coming up for a sale or an exit or retirement, then actually there's a huge interest in going somewhere where they will basically pay less tax. So that's
Where are they going to, Greg? I mean, I alluded to it earlier: Dubai, Switzerland, France, Malta. Is that still the case? Has it got worse since we last spoke?
Yeah, I would say it's consistent level of inquiries. So if worse could be defined as still happening, then yeah, that's definitely the case. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I'll be dealing with potential clients and clients at the moment where I'm undertaking that advice right now to find ways for them to move overseas and find
Okay, thanks ever so
those
much.
tax-free locations or reduced tax locations. Yeah.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that, Glenn. I'm gonna bring in Julie now. Julie, let's talk about the Lido. I'm going to share the screen here because I've got your website here as well. Let's have a share. I did have the brewery. There we go. Just give a quick plug one more time. There's Greg's. Right, the Lido. Julie, it must be tough running this. Let's talk about the positives first of all. 240,000 visitors. That's amazing.
Absolutely. Our Lido is very well visited. It's an essential part to our community. I think, unlike other people that may come on your show, we're a registered charity. So we were set up to preserve and protect Cheltenham Lido for future generations. And over the years, we've been steadily building the number of people that come through and enjoy it. And it's become an essential part of so many people's lives, not just in Cheltenham, but Gloucestershire as well. And we're very proud of those statistics. It's excellent.
And you've been there for a while, so you've seen some fundamental changes, obviously started from, well, the very, very beginning in 1986.
Absolutely. I came through the doors at a point where the Lido had gone through a period of a lack of investment. We needed to concentrate on the fundamentals first and to get things up and running. And I literally had a desk and a pen. And I also had 12 very brave trustees that stood with me in order to get the business up and running and to go from there. And I think it's amazing the achievements over the years and the support of our community, without whom the Lido could have been lost. Many Lidos have closed over the years through lack of funding and investment. And I understand that the council has significant priorities and Lidos fell by the wayside. But we're really fortunate in Cheltenham that the council allowed us to go forward. We initially signed a 25-year lease. We're now on our second lease with Cheltenham Borough Council, and we're guaranteed here until 2056. But we're completely self-financing. We have to make the business work. It has to run at a profit. But also we need that money for future investments. We've got some great plans ahead of us now that we've got a long tenure again to seek grants and opportunities to continue the business to flourish.
Now, one of the things that impressed me so much, because it's not just about the summertime that you do some good business. You obviously have a sort of cold water swim clientele as well. Can you just explain about that, please? Because you try and keep it open as much as possible.
Absolutely. We want the Lido to be a 12-month-a-year operation, and people really miss it when they can't come through our gates. And so we now operate right the way through the year, apart from any essential maintenance that we have to carry out. And we offer cold water swimming that goes right the way through the year. Historically, we've always had the Christmas Day swim, in which hundreds of people and thousands of people arrive for the spectacle. But we offer swimming 6 sessions a week throughout the winter, and the pool water temperature can drop down as low as 4 degrees Celsius. But it has its followers, and there's a great buzz around the facility. The cafe's open, and regulars who miss the Lido, but maybe cold water isn't for them, they come down to the cafe just to meet up with their friends. It's a very social place, and get through those darker winter months.
Julie, I think you do an absolutely fantastic job. Congratulations. I can't imagine how difficult that is, but and a great asset for Cheltenham. And it's great to see that Cheltenham Borough Council have backed you so much as well. Sometimes our councils get ridiculed or pulled apart, but sometimes they do some good stuff. And I just want to say, well done to them as well. Okay, guys, we kind of come to the end of the section of Punchline Talks. Let's talk about, just very quickly, parking. I got a parking charge the other day. I won't say which town it was. I must admit, I did make a mistake. I chanced my arm. I have this little bet with my wife that she always says, go back, pay your parking. I go, no, I'll just chance it and I'll get away with it. Sometimes I win. A lot of the times I lose. This is going to cost me 35 quid. Anyway. But we all need parking charges. We need to raise revenue, don't we? So I'm going to start with you, Greg, because you must have a problem where you are, because people park in your car parking space. They go and visit your business centre, blocking your car parking. What's your view on this sort of stuff?
It's a difficult one. I mean, I can't really keep tabs on who's who in the car park. We've got 50 spaces. We're always busy. I assume and hope it's our customers, but I know it isn't. And actually, parking is just a problem locally for everybody. There's far more cars than there is parking, full stop. And whether that's on the lanes or in town, everywhere, there's just far too many cars and nowhere to put them.
Okay, Greg. Parking charges, have you been? I can't imagine you getting a ticket, because I always think you're a pretty straight guy.
Oh, I've managed to get a couple in my time, and I usually deserve them as well.
So fair play, Glenn. What about yourself, mate? Because obviously, looking on the revenue side of things, coming from that side of stuff, the councils, carry on putting up the prices of tickets and stuff. Parking tickets.
Actually, I haven't got a problem with the local authority ones. I think if you make a mistake and as you said, if you pay, that's probably 35 quid if you pay within 14 days or something like that, isn't it? And that doesn't sound too unreasonable, because I'd have thought 90% of the people make a mistake, which was accidental. And I've had loads, and I doubt if a single one of them I did on purpose. I just not checked the time properly, forgot, parked in the wrong place, all those sorts of things. The ones I do have a huge problem with, and if anybody has ever been involved in, is the private parking charges, when you're somewhere or other and you park in a space which, again, it's probably a mistake, and you think you're actually valid, and the penalties are much higher. The appeal process is poor. And nobody listens to you. And I've got a very quick story on that one. Actually, I mentioned earlier on, my wife's a community healthcare visitor. She was visiting a family in flats, and parked in a space clearly labelled as visitor. And when she came back, she'd been charged. and it was like £100 fine or something like that. And then she refused to roll over, and she went all the way, took it all the way to court. And they sent a lawyer from London up to the court in Gloucester, I think it was. And the judge immediately said to the lawyer, said, you and your people just can't keep treating people like this. Found almost instantly in favour of my wife, and plus costs and all that kind of thing. Obviously didn't have to pay. They'd sent this lawyer up from London. It must have cost them a fortune. And so I think that's the ones I've got a problem with, because that's actually profiteering, I would say, rather than what the local authority are doing, which is just saying, shouldn't have parked there. Here's your punishment. Don't do it again.
Okay, before I bring Max in, I'm going to bring Julie back in because Julie, you run your own parking scheme. It's a source of revenue for you as well. What's your thoughts on it?
It's a very difficult situation. We need our car park income. Without it, we cannot continue to invest in the facility. And we've invested over £5 million in Cheltenham Lido since we took over, and have great plans coming forward. We have to have parking control. It can't be done by the Borough Council. We have to employ a private company. We try and make sure that it's signed as well as it can, and that the machines are as easy to use as possible to avoid those errors. We don't want people to receive fines. We want to try and educate as much as we can. It's a really difficult situation, but if we don't have the controls in place, then there's abuse, and people park wrong as well and block others in, and then they can't get out. So I understand frustrations when people do receive a parking fine, and we do ask people to contact us directly if they do, rather than going direct to the parking company. But it's horrendously difficult. I never thought, as a leisure operator, that my business would be centred on a car park as well. But we try and ensure that we give back as much. We've spent over £1 million on our car park just this last winter, in order to make it as operatingly safe as possible, with pedestrian walkways, improved disabled parking spaces. We've put in EV chargers. We've put all our solar out there. So we don't just look at that land and think it's there to make money. It's there to support our business, and as such, we have to invest in it as well. But obviously, people do get upset when they receive parking charges, whether they're chancing it or whether it's a genuine mistake. And we try and work with people as much as we can.
That's nice to hear, Julie, as well. The investment is very impressive. Thank you for that. Max, I'm going to bring you in. I know you've got a dash very shortly, so your views, car parking.
Not very much to add. My general view is that we need probably to move away from a mindset where we expect just to park our cars for free wherever we take them, and towards a sort of system where we have a better public transport offering. And when we can get to that, I think we will have less discussions around car parking and car parking availability. I've had car parking tickets in the past. One at Lidl for using the EV charging point for too long, and one when I went to Shire Hall to present a petition. I parked in the wrong space in one of Gloucester's multi-stories. They were both my fault, and it can be really frustrating, right? But if we had a more enlightened system where we had better public transport and we had better walking and cycling links, I think we would all be better off from an economic perspective. I mean, that's definitely true, right? Because most people who go to Cheltenham Town Centre, we do need to have car parking there, but most people who go to Cheltenham Town Centre do not arrive by car. All the studies show. But it's also the case that actually more active travel means that we will all be healthier into our dotage, and the NHS will be better off as well. I hate to sound like one of those sort of people who says, well, the answer is actually something different. I get annoyed with car parking as much as everyone else, but a holistic view is the thing that's needed, I think.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that. Max, I know you've got a dash, so what's your pick of the punchlines? Everybody, we're going to do this bit very, very quickly. 30 seconds, Max. Pick of the punchline this week.
Stories this week focusing on plans for new flats in Cheltenham. Obviously, we're a town that has a big housing shortage. It's difficult to develop new homes, and both of these sort of show that what we need to do is have more places for people to live in the right areas, particularly in Cheltenham town centre. This is a thing where we can make sure our town centre remains vibrant for the future if we have more people living closer to the shops. And I would add a further story for you all guys to pick up on, Mark, next week. Find out what's going on with Canada Life and Cavendish House, because that is a prime site for a bit of retail on the ground floor and nice flats for people to live in of different costs above ground floor level. That's a sustainable way to develop our town centre, and I'm really keen that Canada Life gets on with it and delivers that development, or sells up and allows someone else to do it.
Okay, thanks so much for that. Maybe we can have a chat about this afterwards. Julie, I'm going to bring you in very quickly. Pick of the punchlines, please.
It has to be the Wilderness Centre in the Forest of Dean that's recently received just over 800,000 to assist it going forward as a community ownership group. It's a fantastic resort in the Forest of Dean, and I think we can all agree that getting out there in nature, whether it's walking or just sitting and being outside, is such a benefit to our mental health and our physical health as well. So as a charity ourselves, always seeking additional funds, well done to the organisation behind it, and I hope and wish you every success for the future.
I just want to say as well, they've done a fantastic job there. It's worked really, really hard. Thank you for that, Julie. Greg, I'm going to bring you in. 30 seconds, please. Pick of the punchlines.
Sure. So, as a business with agricultural roots, the headline that caught me was the reduction in high hay harvest, so a crisis in hay. As a brewery, we use barley, which produces straw. But if you've got animals, and I've got a few sheep, and we've actually had to move them this year to different sites because there's just not enough feed. And it just really highlights, very realistically, that we are having an impact on the climate, and it's very real and it's present. So let's try and do something about it and not ignore it.
Yes, and don't use pictures of bales of straw instead of hay. But there we go. That's what I've learned this week. Glenn, thank you for that, Greg. Glenn, pick of the punchlines, please, sir.
Yeah, I was just going to respond to Max's point on Cavendish House. Just simply, what a great idea. I hope it doesn't go the way that Debenham's millstone around Gloucestershire University's neck is going, because it's an absolutely fantastic idea. But sometimes the costs are so much greater than can be predicted. But my pick of the punchlines is Bye Bye Smiths, Hello Jones. I really enjoyed that, because actually I didn't know that news had skipped me completely. I hadn't realised. I think since we when you and I used to do, well, you're obviously the sharp end, but when I would do a lot more with Radio Gloucestershire, I kind of had a better handle on what's going on in big business. I don't see quite so much of that nowadays, so that was great to see that. I don't think I even realised, and what a weird coincidence they've gone from Alas Smith and Jones.
No, thanks so much for that. It's quite funny, isn't it? Because we do these national stories and national link them back to Gloucestershire, and they're really, really popular. I think it goes to highlight how people don't, how people consume the news in a different way. Unfortunately, guys, that's all we've got time for today. I just want to thank our fantastic panel. Thanks ever so much for getting up extra early this morning and for putting your cases across. I'd like to thank our wonderful sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors, and I'd like to thank all of you for watching. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time, because I'm actually off to Tenerife very shortly. But until then, remember, it's all in the punchline. Thanks ever so much. Bye.